So young people, I don't doubt that they look at it and they're like, it's all broken. These young folks have never actually seen it really work. So I can see people are questioning why certain types of candidates are being elected in some of these like congressional races, why you have the mayor you have in New York. This is why. Because at some point, people get tired of a thing not working.
Welcome back to the Virginia Consumer. I am Andy. I'm here with my co-host Marty, and of course Jim Moye, who is the guru of all things regulation, which is something that is really important that we cover, especially right now in Chesterfield. So I'm excited that you're here. Thank you so much, and appreciating your instruction with the technical side of things, because it's been kind of crazy today. So
no, thank you all for having me again. I always enjoy being with you guys.
So I want to start just basically with you giving us an update, because things are new in your neck of the woods. So can you tell us what's going on with you?
So I have joined the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I was appointed by the governor to sit on that. It's a 17-person board that handles funding and setting guidelines for state transportation projects. I actually just finished my first set of meetings this week, so I am excited about that opportunity to, quite frankly, serve people. More than serving institutions, it's about serving people. And, you know, when you're talking about roads and bridges and bus service and all these different things, right, you start thinking about people, right? Some, people who are getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning just trying to get to work. Someone who gets on the VRE line in, some godforsaken place and they have to get to DC every day. It's the ability to be able to kind of work in that kind of stuff in a volunteer capacity that, to me, moves the needle a little bit. So I'm super excited about the opportunity to serve the folks of the Commonwealth doing that. And as big as that is, nothing is as big as being able to be on Virginia Consumer. And there is this small thing I do every now and then. I actually have my own podcast, not nearly as good as Virginia Consumer, with a good friend of mine, Charlie Dirador, that's called Small Biz, Big Ideas. And what we do is we talk about small business. It's meant to be kind of a thought leadership kind of conversation about small business on a weekly basis. And we've had couple of legislators, we've had small business owners, just a kind of a mix of people who want to talk about small business and how we can make it better. Because it's complicated, because everybody always talks about, the backbone that drives everything is small business, but a lot of people don't really understand. And Charlie has spent a lot of his career helping small businesses. I grew up in a small business household, and it's been a big part of my career. So we enjoy doing it. But like I said, nothing, and I mean nothing, is like Virginia Consumer. Because when Andy's on the job, ask Marty.
That's right. Yep. Look out. And it's so funny, because I think a big part of why we're doing this, especially the way we are, is because you kind of snapped me back into reality, and you were like, you got to show up. You just can't tap out. And I was ready to tap out, trying to deal with all the regulatory nonsense, the issues, the bureaucracy of it all. And, you talked some sense into me. I got back in there, and I even went to a board of supervisors meeting last night, which was kind of crazy. I'm not real happy about what's going on. If no one's familiar, basically we're in Chesterfield County. I am, and Marty is. And we've got two things going on that are pretty major. One is a landfill that is a ecological disaster at this point. It was a privately owned company that went bankrupt, and now they were literally talking about black goo at this board of supervisors meeting that is just kind of spreading out. There's gases, there's occasional explosions. It's like a horror show. And then we have the data centers coming in and watching everyone show up wanting to speak and only getting 15 minutes at the end of a meeting for the entire community when they're just finding out after 7 years that there was an NDA in place and they're going to be getting all these data centers. So regulation came up nonstop at that meeting. And I know that it's not something a lot of people understand. I wouldn't know anything about it had I not been through everything we've been through. And you've always been the best at explaining it. So just a little bit of background. At the meeting, there was an engineer who told the board of supervisors, all of this stuff is going on at the landfill. You are able to change the laws. When people start bringing things to you and there are concerns, your job at the board is to grab a patron and get to work and do something to kind of hedge off all of this kind of stuff. I don't know how well you can explain that process in a short time, but what are they supposed to do?
So, I'm going to talk in like kind of vast hypotheticals here, right? But let's use this the kind of the landfill situation as an example. Right, this landfill has become an issue. You've got whoever owned it is now bankrupt. The county wants to step in and take it over. There are existing essentially there are existing rules on the books on how they handle those things. Those rules can always be changed, though. But a lot of times, what would drive two things potentially would drive the change. Number one, the county wants to do something very specific. In like this example, would want to do something very specific with that landfill, and they're literally legally barred from doing that. So they have to go change the laws in order to allow them to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do. Another kind of legal prohibition could be that they can take it over and for the most part do what they want to do with it. But there could be other obstacles. And okay, so they're going to take over the landfill and they're going to clean it up, but they don't have the money to do it. So in order to get the money, they have to go to the state or go to the federal government and try to get that money. Both of those entities could say, yeah, we'd be willing to do it, but you need certain laws on the books in order for us to give you the money to do it. And so then they would have to come back behind that and do certain types of potentially have to do certain types of legal changes in order to make that happen. But they have choices. That's the big thing. And they can always look at a situation and say, it's not working for us legally. Let's get creative and try to figure out a way to fix the problem. And the way, not to turn this into a riff, but I think you just hit on what is the key way to push them to do those kind of things. And that is having people show up. And also, as much as everybody jokes about the strongly worded letter, when you start to communicate with like supervisors or council members and things like that, and you start to track that, that's how you push people to action. Especially when you can say to them very clearly what it is that you want. Hey, this landfill is a problem. There's black goo. It smells awful. What I'm asking you to do, council, is conduct a 30-day review, figure out what's going on, and then at your next public meeting, explain to the general public what's going on. I think when you push them and you push them with intention and purpose like that, your elected officials tend to be more responsive. What a lot of people will do is they'll send an email and say, "Oh boy, that landfill sure stinks. You should do something about it."
Right. Okay.
Right. That gets file 13, right?
Right. Gotcha.
Thanks for sending us that. Boom.
Right.
But when you come with the intention and you're like, I want you to do this specific thing, I want you to do it in this time frame, then that kind of holds the elected's feet to the fire about what they should or should not be doing then. And it it puts a marker down about kind of what the expectations are. And when people ever ask me how to approach government, I'm like, you got to have intention, because can you imagine on any given day, government is getting, depending on the size, hundreds, if not thousands of communications every day. And a lot of them are what I said. I don't like data centers because the construction trucks are loud and they generate a whole bunch of dust.
Right. Not enough. Yeah.
Right. Give and sometimes it's wish list thinking about what you want out of it. So let's use something other than the landfill. Let's say you're looking at someone, a developer is building something and it's gone all awry. Like they're not complying with some of the things they should be complying with, and the county isn't doing anything about it. Rather than just saying, county, hey, you should look at developer Y, it should be conduct a thorough analysis of developer Y at this location. Please, I would like a response within 30 days, or it can be addressed at X Board of Supervisors meeting. Right?
Gotcha.
It puts a marker down, and it very clearly lays out the expectation as to kind of what you want.
I think that's great. That's a really good action item that people can use and a good framework. So we're going to ask what we want. We're going to say exactly what that is. And then we're going to put a timeline on it. And we're going to make sure that we tell them how to respond, like where you want them to respond or how.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I think anyone can use that to their advantage. Now that I'm thinking of that, I happen to do something similar to that. Maybe I'm going to have to reframe it. And I sent an open letter to Aaron Barr, because in my county, the builder from our backstory is now involved in over 20 lawsuits. So my big ask was, listen, on behalf of all of these families, here's what's going on. Can you please look into this builder? Because they still have not revoked or paused his license. And the response did not come until it started to get some exposure, and the neighborhood started to send emails as well. But the response was so disappointing because all they did was review my personal case at DPOR rather than hear what I was saying, that I am representative of more problems. And also, here are these families. And it was just kind of brushed off. What do you do in those circumstances? And I went to the board meeting and sat right next to her yesterday. I don't think she recognized me, but it literally was like serendipitous. The security guard was like, sit right here. And I was like, oh, do I have to? It was literally right next to her. Very nice. But I was like, oh no. But what should we do in those scenarios when we get a bad response?
Number one, I would say don't stop, because that's the number one thing I think that tends to happen is people become disheartened by the response that they get, especially if you've had to wait a long time for that response.
Right.
Because it's like, I waited 3 months and this is all I have to show for it, really? And it just makes you want to stop. And I think there are a couple of things you can do, and you've said part of it, and that is sometimes you have to reframe what the ask is. And I tend to believe that not, it's kind of circumstance dependent, but the more specific you can be, the better. So let's just use the example of the letter, that you sent to Aaron Barr. It's, hey, this developer is now been involved in, best we can tell, 20 plus lawsuits. If you actually had cites to the lawsuits, that would be helpful, right? That says, here are the 20 plus lawsuits. And we're asking, not just me, but me and others are asking that you review this person's current licensure, because while these are all pending lawsuits, potentially there are issues there for folks who have already purchased homes from this person, who may be in the process of purchasing homes from this person, or could purchase homes from them in the near future. Therefore, asking that you review their current licensure status and provide some analysis of that review within 30 days. Please return it to this email address. And in scenarios like that, I know there are a lot of people who are like, well, that feels combative. This is not combative stuff. This is.
Oh, I'm combative,
business.
So don't worry about me.
Well, but this is yeah, but this is business, right? Because
Right.
in the business world, when two companies are duking it out and there's a legitimate problem, people can say, hey, there's a legitimate problem. So when an individual points out that there's a problem with the business, what's the difference? There is no difference. In fact, one could argue that the individual pointing out that there's an issue with the business maybe is a bigger deal, because businesses could have skin in the game to get into weird back and forths with each other, versus an individual laying out a case as to, I'm not telling you to strip them of their license. I'm saying factually they have a number of lawsuits. As they have a number of lawsuits, I'm asking that you review their license, because you probably should review their license. This is not one lawsuit. This is not 5 lawsuits. This is not 10. This is 20 plus lawsuits that are pending with them right now. And it goes into the public. Once you send that letter, it goes into the public record. And that's
Right.
that's an important first step. And it's not pointing fingers and saying they did it. That's not what, you're asking people to do their job. And their job is, you should review their license in light of this. And by the way, this is not me making this up. Here are the citations to the 20 plus lawsuits that are pending for them. And you just made it easy for them.
Yeah.
And it puts them under pressure, under the spotlight, to go and adequately address the issue, versus the brush off. Thanks. We'll get back to you. That's not right. When you get down to that level of specificity, you rightfully should get a pretty detailed response then.
Yeah. And I'm it's so difficult, because there is a history of my own case. It seems like they are just repeating back to me what happened to me. And I and being stalled in that way. And it's over and over by each department. So it is very frustrating, but I did send her the lawsuits. And the fact that nothing's being done is an echo of what happened with the Shoesmith landfill. You know, it's people alerting to an issue in Chesterfield and it being pushed down the line until there's nothing left for people. And they're doing the same thing with the data centers now. And here's another consumer question I've got for you, which I think is kind of important to me. Everyone submitted a request who wanted to speak. And there's only 15 minutes. So it's only given to 5 people in the community per board of supervisors meeting per time. So one 15-minute session in the morning, 5 people, one 15-minute session in the evening, 5 people. Not only did the board of supervisors fill the time to push the clock past 8 p.m., they also did not air the last half of the meeting. They literally cut it off and didn't show any of the individual speeches. They didn't show a whole discussion on a 1% tax that was being proposed to be voted on. Cut the entire meeting in half just to avoid showing the signs and the audible like gasps and noises from the crowd, because like people were angry. At one point they were just mocking the board of supervisors. They cut the meeting in half, and I'm like, regardless of what happens, it's our right to know. So how dare you? And is that legal? Is that kosher? And how do we find out if you don't know?
I'm sure they have rules that govern the fact that it's a public meeting. Mm-hmm. And in a public meeting, they have very specific requirements that it should be on the county website somewhere that relates directly to what those requirements are for them. I would start with, in the short term, whoever your designated rep is, I would send them the strongly worded letter that basically says, hey, I attended this meeting on this day, and the recordings only reflect half of the meeting. I'm asking you as my representative, when will you publish the second half of those recordings? And if you're not going to publish them, if they're not going to be published, can you just explain
why?
Statutorily why they're not going to be published?
Okay.
Right? Because I think that's a very fair request of your representative. And, you know, as a lawyer, I think a lot of times people ask me the question, because when you're frustrated, you want to go to the highest person possible immediately to get an answer. And I'm like, well, sometimes you're better served working the chain of command, even though that's not the most satisfying answer. But there are people who are designated to do a thing. Start with them. Make them do their job. Right. And even if their job is to tell you no, make them do that. But when we kind of start to jump around in the chain a little bit, then we let people off the hook. And that's my big thing, is don't let people off the hook. And again, this is not meant to be said in a combative way. The process is set up the way it's set up just so that you have a representative who should be answering this very basic question. Why is there only half of the recording?
Right.
Why? That makes no sense. There's a whole big important discussion that the public's is not going to see now. If in fact they are going to see it, when are they going to see it? Right? Because no doubt, clearly, you want to highlight what was in the second half of that meeting.
Right.
And so you want to know when that's going to be publicly available. And I think starting there is the very fair thing to do. very fair.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to be fair. I already have it recorded too, so I'm not sure why. Like, we're all allowed to record. I'm like, do you think no one's going to share these clips? It's wild, you know? And the other thing that was really bothering me about the way it was run is that the board of supervisors are not timed themselves for their question and answer session. I'm okay with them having more time, but they get documentation ahead of time. There's no reason why they can't be prepared and come with something of value. The amount of nonsense that we had to listen to sitting there, it was just word salad, and nonsense questions. Can we have them limited? How do we do that to where they have to respect our time and not run out the clock on these issues as well so that they can avoid questions at the end?
I think that's a much more complicated thing because they do, they right they do get the right to kind of somewhat control their meeting. But again, I'd also point out to your rep, and this is something probably best served in a face-to-face meeting with
Yeah,
whoever your representative is, by saying, listen, going to a meeting and we sit there and we have to wait till the very end before we get to comment on things. It's time limited. Here's what I'm proposing. It comes back to the defined request. Why do we only get 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the time frame is? And also, could there be full just open forum meetings? So you don't want to do an action meeting and then have public comment at the end of that action meeting? Okay, well, why don't you have just open forum meetings that are, hey, we had a meeting, I'm making this up, on Tuesday. On Tuesday
right,
night, we dealt with these 15 issues, and now we're going to be here for another 2 hours. And in that 2 hours, we're going to take public commentary in the 2 hours, because then that would allow them more time. So, I think also sometime, even though it's not your responsibility in any way, shape, or form to bring answers to elected officials, sometimes I think it helps to be able to say, well, why couldn't you all do that thing? Why can't you just have open forum meetings, either weekly, every other week, something, so that people aren't just jammed in at the end after having to sit through these long meetings? Sometimes they want to review the tapes and they want to see what was said and actually come up with a cogent response and have cogent comments for you, rather than just some emotional outburst. Because
right,
I can imagine probably sitting there listening to all of that. Sometimes it lends itself to an emotional outburst, like, wait a minute, you're going to do what? Oh, no, you're not doing that. No, 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 not over my dead body. Not in my backyard will you do that.
right.
Right. Um, so I think that's a good way to go try to tackle that issue, is having that face-to-face conversation with your representative and saying, what can we do different? What can we do better about this? Because let's have to sit there through all of that just to get to the end and be rushed through. Why?
Right,
There are bigger and better options than that now.
right.
If
Yeah,
if I may chime in a little bit. Um, I I appreciate the, validity and the process you're outlining. The, for lack of a better phrase, clown show that I've observed over the last 5 years, gives me, let's say, a bit of skepticism. And I've seen public officials lie on the record, thank God for FOIA, uh, over and over. And their process is, at least from what I've experienced, is to answer the wrong question, deny responsibility, and run out the clock. And I think they're getting, at least I hope, they're losing their grip on the game that they've been playing a long time. And I think I've said this for a while. I think some things are shifting. I think Generation X as an influence is a lot less, let's say, willing to agree and willing to believe. So there's an automatic skepticism. I don't think they're used to that. I think the digital record, the amount of files we have with people who've been involved with our case indirectly or directly, and the things that they've done, it's wild. Uh, I would think you would cover your tracks better. So I don't think they're ready for the digital record. The other thing is, I think the cultural shift. Virginia to me seems like a place that's history is one where there's that kind of almost like a British overlay where you do not question certain people. You don't you don't push beyond your class or your caste, if you will. And so having people come from the Northeast where you may have a reputation for being rude. I think a lot of the people that come to Virginia from the Northeast really are appreciative and want to lean in. And for 10 years, that was our experience until we hit this wall of the power behind kind of the more maybe the generational system. Um, and so having enough of us come and say, "But I didn't ask you that question. You're answering the wrong question. You're ignoring it, or you misstated, or Tuesday you said this, Wednesday you're contradicting. You're offended that I'm pointing this out, but I'm still pointing it out. I'm not going away because you've demonstrated offense." I think that, and maybe we're reaching the end of a cycle of nepotism where the skill set that's been passed on is kind of faded away and they're not able to do what maybe their forefathers were as far as controlling the environment. But I think we've gotten to this point where the one example we had where you sent the letter to Aaron Barr, Andrea sent a lot of letters, well documented over the years. I think we're a half a decade into this at this point. Literally, I just thought of that.
Yeah.
Um, and the responses are non existent or denial, or they answer the question we didn't ask at best. Um, but I think what got a response, it was the wrong response. It wasn't addressing any of the issues he raised. And Andrea did identify all the court cases, very detailed, very specific. Um, but the response we got, poor as it may be, I think it only came because some of the neighbors actually, because they're starting, a lot more people are experiencing this breaking point, this tipping point in their situations. So they're incredibly frustrated. Some people are afraid, some people are desperate. So some of the neighbors chimed in. I think that's the only reason we got any response. And when we were at one data center event, not the one yesterday, but at one prior, and there was people outside that were opposed to it, and it was hot out. And I had asked them, I said, if this is going to be representative of the community, were you given any space indoors? Because they're all outside sweating like crazy. And that just didn't even come up. And they said, we're pressing for a town hall, a proper town hall, but we're getting resistance. To me, I I've got enough of a track record with these individuals where my sense that they're going to do the right thing if we approach them the right way is I can't visualize that as a reality. And I said to this individual, I can't remember the woman's name. You had her on camera a little bit, Ange, but
Mhm.
um, she's very nice, very knowledgeable. And what I don't understand is why we wouldn't just organize our own town hall. I mean, the people that, let's say, have put us in this position are either not well equipped, and I get it. There's no perfect government and things happen. They're managing a lot, but we're past all of the we'll give you breathing room, we'll give you grace, we'll give you space. We're way, way past that. So that means you're either not good at your job, so you can't help us, or your job is maybe to help other people, and that's a small group of individuals that has nothing to do with us. What you're here to do is kind of present this idea that there's this kind of institutional oversight that is going to get the job done and going to do the right thing. But ultimately, you're just managing an algorithm that is still leaning towards a baby boomer population that's going to kind of watch maybe the local news, and maybe they're not going to be upset at the fact that they didn't have the full video on YouTube. They cut it because maybe it didn't look so good. They're going to run that clock. They're going to run that playbook. I think. I just think we've hit a tipping point in our society where I don't know that it's going to work anymore.
So, a couple things to respond to. First, I would agree that, first of all, technology as a whole is a game changer. So, the mere fact that meetings are streamed at all changes everything. Because imagine before streaming, who, what normal person has time to go sit in a council, in a board of supervisors meeting? The vast majority of people are out living their lives. They're not going to show up to something like that. Even in scenarios where they have skin in the game, they're not going to show up, right? Just for a lot of different reasons. So I think the introduction of technology has greatly changed. Hence, that's how you end up with people only doing half the recording, right? Because it's changed the game now, and they have to pay attention to what's being recorded. I do agree also that we are going through a generational shift such that, here's the way I look at it. My daughter is 21 years old. At 21, what good things has she seen out of institutions? In her life, she has seen the housing bust of '07. She's seen the great auto bailout that came subsequent to that, and the failed economy that was a failed economy for 5 years after that. She has seen mass war. This is not about where people's politics lay. It's just a fact. You've seen America engage in these mass wars that have had substantial financial impact, mostly negative, on the country. COVID, everything that is the fallout from COVID. So that's what they've seen of institutions. So young people, I don't doubt that they look at it and they're like, it's all broken. So even for people our age where we're like, this is just not great, these young folks have never actually seen it really work. So I can see people are questioning why certain types of candidates are being elected in some of these like congressional races, why you have the mayor you have in New York. This is why. Because at some point, people get tired of a thing not working.
Thanks for listening to Virginia Consumer. Everything shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views expressed are personal opinions based on the individual experiences of our hosts and guests. They do not constitute legal, financial, or medical advice and do not represent the views of any affiliated individuals or organizations. Always do your own research and consult a qualified professional about your specific situation.